you've been given a metric to hit. If you haven't, then you need to talk about that with your manager, saying, what's my goal here? Is it engagement? Is it growth? Is it number of participants in a certain program? Is it satisfaction scores and net promoter score, whatever that is? And then this is actually how product managers are given a job to do, right? In a tech company, is that they're given a metric, and how they work with their product to make sure that that metric gets achieved is kind of up to them. It's a sandbox that they can play in. And so I would say all I'm really talking about is about listening to your users.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Gripe podcast. In this podcast, we learn how to grow member-based organizations. I'm your host Farhat Khan. I am the CEO of Gripe Digital. We are a digital agency and we help professional associations grow their membership by building membership websites. We host a number of learning events throughout the month. So if you want to grow the membership of your professional association, please take a look at the learning events on our website at gripe.ca/events. That is grype.ca/events. This is the live recording of our podcast episode. If you're joining us live today, welcome. We'll take some questions from the audience. So if you have any question, please submit them on the chat window on the right, and we will get to them as soon as we can. This is a special episode of our podcast with a special guest, Laura Buhler. Laura is the CEO of the C100. The C100 is an association of business leaders of Canadian technology companies. Laura, thank you so much for joining us today. Do you want to start by telling us a bit about yourself and your work?
Sure. So yes, I'm Laura Buhler. I'm based in the San Francisco Bay Area, where my nonprofit association, C100, is headquartered. So an important nuance that you just mentioned, you said, leaders of Canadian technology companies, that's not necessarily true for all of our members. What they all have in common is that they are Canadian tech leaders, but most of them actually don't live in Canada. About 40% of our members are in Canada, and the rest are really scattered across the US and Europe and Asia and the Middle East. So we are a global network of Canadian technology leaders. And every year we run programs that support, inspire, advance, and mentor Canadian founders and leaders in technology so that they can succeed globally.
Right. What are some companies that have gone through your program?
So what you're probably referring to is one of our best known programs. It's called the Fellowship for Canadian founders of early stage technology companies. This is different from our membership program and our core membership base. Every year we select 20 Canadian founders. We don't care where they're located, whether it's in, and I'm listing places where we've had people located before, whether they're from, Yellowknife, or Toronto, or Hong Kong, or Paris. We just care that they are incredible Canadian entrepreneurs of vision who are leading early stage technology companies that will have a huge impact on the world. So every year we competitively select 20 of them. And this is a big initiative for our membership community, actually, because you have to be a member to actually nominate a founder to become a C100 fellow. And so we do a big nomination drive. We get hundreds and hundreds, almost 500 nominations this past year. And then the founders who receive that nomination are invited to apply. We also activate a big part of our community to manage the selection process. And eventually we come out with 20 founders. So it's it's free for them to participate. They get a lot out of it. We spend a really, big material part of our budget, our OpEx, and our team's time and attention on this program that is free for the fellows to participate in. But it is quite competitive, and so unfortunately, all 500 who are nominated don't get to experience that part of the C100 program, but 20 lucky founders do. So we have we're at the point in the year calendar where we've selected those fellows. The world does not know who they are yet. We've just confirmed our 20 fellows, and they'll be announced in about 4 weeks to the broader world. We usually do a press release and that kind of thing to drum up some support and awareness for these early stage tech founders.
Wonderful, wonderful. Are there any names that have been in your alumni that we might know of, big names?
Maybe. If you're in Canada, So most of the bigger names are in Canada. There's a couple bigger names that are in the US as well. Startups that have done really, really well. In Canada, Mike Ketchen, the founder of Wealthsimple, Andrew D'Souza, the founder of Clearco, Nora Sakija, the founder of Majuri, Martin Basiri, the founder of Applyboard. But really we have 300 alumni who've been through that program because we run it every year and have since we began. So there's lots of really incredible companies actually in Canada that are led by our fellows, our alumni. And in the US, if you're in the US, you might know the startup called Sonder. I shouldn't call it a startup anymore because they just IPO'd like about a month ago. That's Francis Davidson is the CEO of Sonder. When they came to, and he and his co-founders came to the 48 Hours program, which is our event for the fellowship. That was called Flatbook, but they've rebranded since then, and a lot of them do because they're quite early stage when they come in. All of those companies led by our fellows are usually in the Series A window, and so relatively speaking, on their startup journey, they're quite early.
So Laura, what are some of the key ideas that associations can learn from these technology companies, you think?
Well, okay, so let's face it, right? The association world is not known for being super innovative and technologically advanced. We run, our product is usually some form of a community, access, maybe an opportunity to share your voice, policy-wise, advocacy, right? And so these are not necessarily high-tech products. And so I actually think there's a lot that we can borrow from the tech world. C100 is in a pretty unique situation because we serve the tech community, and so it is really it's really important that we're staying up to date with the tools and culture. I'll use the word culture of the people and the companies that we serve, which are ultimately really bleeding edge, right? They're creators, they're innovators, they're people who are creating the future, and so I think we can learn a lot from the tech world. One of the things that I will say is, because me and my team serve such a technology audience at C100, we default to technology. So we use, we are always changing the products and features that we use. We are leveraging technology so that we can scale ourselves. We're an incredibly small team compared to the size of the community that we support, and so we leverage a lot of no-code, off-the-shelf tools, like Notion and Airtable and Vimcal and Calendly, etc. We don't use a lot of the kind of, I guess, incumbent or older school products out there like Outlook or Lotus Notes or so we do leverage technology quite a bit. And I think that the other piece that is we borrow from the technology world is the obsession around product. So for those of you who are not from the product and technology world, I'll just give a quick kind of definition. But when in tech, when people talk about product, they're not talking about a good that you would buy, like a product that you would buy in terms of a physical thing. The product is actually the thing that the piece of technology, right? The piece of technology that you've developed, and that's ultimately that the product is a thing that has a core value proposition. It has a price. Maybe that price is free, but maybe it costs a lot. We don't know. And ultimately, it's like if your user or your member buys that thing, that product, what is it that they're actually buying? And so I think that this is starting to get to the core of what I think we have really discovered at C100, that the product is the community, right? It is the other members that people are kind of buying into, and it's on us to make sure that our product or our membership experience, which is really what the product is, at least in our association, and it's incumbent on us to make sure that membership experience ultimately leads to them building a community around themselves. So we don't do advocacy work. We don't do a lot of the other, we don't have like discounts to special programs or products that our community would use. A lot of associations do. That's like something, maybe some of the people here visiting us, those are part of their core value proposition. For us, it's really about making sure that we have a membership experience that helps Canadian entrepreneurs and technology leaders connect with one another and build relationships with each other. So because that's our core product, then we say, okay, how do we actually do that? So we host some events for them to get together. We facilitate a members-only Slack workspace. We have a member directory that's only available for members. We have a series of, we have a couple of conferences that we run. One is that one for early stage tech companies, and we do one that is for growth stage technology leaders, whether they're founders or senior operators. And a very association world way of looking at that would be that the event itself is the product. Okay, well, people get a membership so they can come to the event. I really think that thinking is flawed. I think that the community is the product, and that you use events and some tools that may be non-technical, like an event, or tools that might be technical, like facilitating a Slack workspace, or building a membership directory, for example, or a portal for membership. Those facilitate the members' access to the core product, which is a community of people. Now, this will be different for every single association, right? Not everybody joins an association just to meet everyone else in it. You might join an association if you're a nurse, so that you can get access to certain discounts or access to career advancement or courses. There's, of course, like an endless number of association models out there. I would just challenge everybody to really think hard and fast about what is the actual product? Like, what is a person's purpose for joining? And I don't mean what's the thing that makes them buy a membership, right? That might be an event that they really wanted to go to, but what's the real purpose for them actually wanting to go to the event? It's because they want something else. And in our case, we think that's because they want to build a network around them.
Right. So if you want to like come up with a generic definition of the product, the way you're saying it, so would it be like members actually come to the association to solve a certain number of problems, and the association kind of like have to have the solutions to those problems, and when like the marriage of those like problem and solution, if you can make that happen, that is the product? Like, would you say?
I think that's actually probably that's probably a much better way of putting it than I did. However, I would caution against being overly focused on what the problem statement is for each of your members. I happen to know when our members join C100, there's a range of personas within our community, though you have to be a Canadian who's either building technology or investing in it. So that's the core member persona. If you're a Canadian building technology, when do you think, man, I really need a network around me? I really need to like get to know some people in another market, maybe Silicon Valley, for example, where this Canadian association is headquartered. More often than not, it's when a founder is on the fundraising journey, right? When a founder is hiring or looking for a board member, or starting to open up their sales process and go to market to a new market. So in our case, we're very well known for having access to the Silicon Valley market. It's by far not at all the only thing that we do, but we're known for this market at least within Canada. And so you might say a founder's got a problem to solve, which is like, okay, she needs to start fundraising. And so she's like, I don't know any investors. Okay, well, pretty much every Canadian general partner at a venture fund in Silicon Valley who's Canadian is affiliated with the C100 in some way. That's not, I don't know if we've got 100%, but our penetration is very, very high. And so it would only be logical they think, oh, well, I'll join this community because I'll at least get that network of fundraisers. However, what we do not have a product that's like, here's how to fundraise, and here we're going to introduce you to all these investors, et cetera. That's way too transactional for what we do. And so we we are really trying to showcase that this is about building a network of supporters, but this is not a product to help you fundraise. Like it's just, and a lot of people do end up meeting we encourage people to network and build their community much earlier before they need it. Maybe you've heard that expression, friends from business, but never business from friends, right? This expression speaks to the idea that people want to build authentic human relationships first that might lead to business down the road. If you're joining C100 because you have to fundraise right now, like, it's probably not going to go well for you. I mean, it might go okay. I shouldn't say it may go well for you, but the joining of a community that has a no selling policy, non-solicitation, like, we've got a bunch of policies for you. You can't just DM people in Slack and say, hey, will you like invest in my company? That's like strictly not allowed in our community. We expect you to like show up at some of the dinners and like introduce yourself in Slack and join your membership cohort onboarding and get to know one another. And those things, as you build that network, then when it becomes time for you to fundraise, or you're hiring, or you're looking for a board member, or maybe you're selling your company, then you at least have people around you who can help through that process. But with whom you've already established a trusting relationship and some reputation in the community. And so that's really what we're trying to encourage behavior-wise among our members. And so what you're talking about with product is absolutely true. You start with a problem, and then you hope you can engineer a product that meets that need. The need that we're meeting, that we hope to meet, is actually helping people build a community. And I do think that there are times when people like realize in their life cycle that they do have a problem, and that maybe they're too late at solving it. Maybe they're trying to get ahead of it. But ultimately, building a company, as you know, Farhad, like, you need people around you who can help you.
Right. So since the C100 is a global community, how do you actually give people like the personal touch? Because the people usually never meet each other in person.
So let's face it, the last 2 years, very few people have met each other in person. So this is not unique to global communities. It would be true for local communities as well. There have been a lot of lockdowns everywhere in the world. So for us, the move to virtual has helped us increase intimacy among the membership community and between us and our members. And the reason is this, that you no longer have to travel for an event in order to get FaceTime with someone. So coming out of the pandemic, our approach is hybrid. And by the way, I don't mean hybrid events. We really actually hate hybrid events at C100 in terms of you're either doing something in person or it's virtual, never both. That's not our style. But for the membership experience overall, some of our experiences are virtual only. For example, we onboard members now in cohorts every month. So if you join C100 in the month of March, your onboarding is at the end of the month. And we do a really special onboarding call where every member gets a chance to introduce themselves. We do a structured breakout sessions with 5 or 6 different breakout rooms where people get to know each other really well. We bring them all back together, and then we go through mission, vision, values, and behaviors. And then we prepare them for how to connect with the rest of the membership. So we'll walk through the Slack channel, how to list your membership on LinkedIn, how to use the directory, etc. And all of that, if you think about that, that's best done virtually. I mean, doing that in person, with a big PowerPoint presentation and, showing and having everyone on their laptops, it's just better to do virtually. And so we've embraced that. What we have found is that some things are done much better in person. So for example, we ran, like everyone probably did, we did a couple of our, we run 2 larger events each year, conferences that are, again, one's for early stage technology founders, our fellowship program, and then one is more targeted at the founders and leaders of growth stage tech companies. And we did both of those things virtually for the last couple of years. And we executed them well. Like, our team was very proud of what we put out. But the intimacy created at a virtual event of that format and that size is just not the same. And so we actually went back to in-person 2 weeks ago. We held our annual members summit in person in California. And I mean, it was like a family reunion minus all of the politics. It was like everyone's hugging. We did COVID testing every single day for everyone. We had on-site PCR station for people to test who needed to travel out of the country. And it was like so fun, intimate, familial. It was like old friends getting to see each other, even though half of the people were new, had never actually met anyone else in person. That's the kind of thing that is just better in person. So we hope to never have to go back to a virtual summit. I mean, like none of us can predict the future, but we hope to never have to do another virtual conference again. What's different is that the of course leveraging these digital tools to do those smaller group onboardings. It's actually, we'll never go back to doing that kind of thing in person. Not that we really did before, but like that kind of an onboarding experience is best done virtually. So I would say we have really grown comfortable with the idea of a hybrid program. Again, never a hybrid single event, but a hybrid program. And you right-size the format to the mission, like to the purpose of the event or the purpose of the activation. Sometimes that makes sense to be virtual, and sometimes that makes sense to be in person. For example, I'm just gonna give another example. Like when you used to go to a dinner for like a professional themed dinner, like maybe your association holds a dinner of some sort, and there's like a panel at dinner. And you're given some sort of like styrofoam chicken breast and bad wine, and you listen to this panel all throughout dinner, but you can't speak to the people next to you. Coming out of COVID, right? Now we question ourselves, why does there have to be a panel at dinner? The whole point of going to a dinner is so you get to know each other, the people you're having dinner with. And so we're actually thinking, well, when we start doing dinners again, we're going to keep them pretty small. And we have already. We've piloted 5 of these. We're about to do a bunch more for our community. We cap them at 12 participants. There's a host, right? But they're not recorded. There's no panel. It's all group, and we coordinate the program so that every single person at the table gets to share something, ask something. And we just think that achieves the purpose of building community with one another much better than a panel. If you want to host a panel discussion, a format like the one you and me are having right now makes a lot more sense. You've got access to a globe of people. You don't have to be, you and me are not co-located in Ottawa, and probably our audience is based all over the place too. And so we actually look to virtual tools for other activations that are just more appropriate. And so I think for the pre-pandemic, at least we were guilty of this, right? We were using in-person for every possible activation. We didn't have any virtual presence. And in the pandemic, we had to use virtual for everything. We had no in-person presence. And I think coming out of this, we have all gotten so much more comfortable with virtual tools and realized where they are appropriate. And again, people will go to bat with me on this. Some people are a big fan of the virtual conferences. I'm just not. I don't think anyone's paying attention to a virtual conference. I think nobody wants to sit on Zoom all day. And similarly, I think for a dinner, nobody wants to listen to a panel over dinner. You want to engage with the people next to you.
Unless the panel is really, really good, like you, right?
Unless it's really, really
right.
good. Yeah, that could be the case.
Okay.
But I've even had, I suggested a panel to somebody, and you know what she said? She's like, well, if it's a panel, why don't we just do this on Zoom?
Yeah.
And we thought, good point. Good point. So look, we're gonna all find the right balance for us coming out of this. I think the lesson for me has been always going back to, you put it better than I did, Farhad. It's like, what's the problem you're trying to solve? What's the right solution or product for that problem? We have had too many one-size-fits-all approaches in the association world before, from event sponsorships, even member portals. Like, there's a lot of stuff out there that's just like, I'm a hammer, everything looks like a nail. But if you're really clear about what the actual product is that people join for, it gives you so much more flexibility to choose the right medium.
Right. So besides hosting the events that you actually have, like how much time does your staff contribute to maintaining the community in general? Or do you think the community kind of like manages itself, their network on their own on Slack?
We definitely does not manage itself. We are heavily invested in learning how to help the community self-manage. So just to give you a sense for, I guess, the structure of C100. So our membership base was 100 members 2.5 years ago, and today we're about 500. So it has, throughout the pandemic, our membership has grown significantly. And that is, that's a challenge, right? It's an exciting challenge. It's an opportunity, I should say. It does require regular management, though, not only through planning these convening moments when the whole community can come together, but planning really cool ways for them to get together and do work. So our selection committee for our fellowship, for example, that's 75 members who are broken out into 10 different groups of 7 or 8 people per group, or 14 groups, I should say. 14 groups of like 5 or 6 people per group, whose whole job is to evaluate applications from founders and startups, and they end up having a great time and debating together. And then they come back together as a huge group, and each, so it's like we do a lot of program management around just virtual programs that the community does together. In terms of managing the community managing itself, we also have someone leading membership experience on our team. And she and I will both leverage our Slack space to seed conversations, to respond to conversations that are happening between our members. We also, of course, have a newsletter, like with our events and things like that coming out. And so all that does take active management. And our team sees that as our core job, which is to manage the community. Now, the pivot that we're trying to make this year is how do we push more of the incentive, or I should say not the incentive, the catalysm, like the catalysts, the initiative, that's the word I'm looking for. How do we push more of the initiative into the community, out of the hands of our members? And the reason that is because we used to be a San Francisco-based organization with 100 members in SF, and now we're several hundred across 27 cities. We just can't physically be all of those places. And to host dinners every other week. Like, it's just not the organization that I led before COVID is just fundamentally different from the one that's today. And so we have started to build what we call in the tech world beta products, which means like test formats that allow our members to self-organize. So the first one that we ran was a pilot, you call it a pilot program, which was, we got 5 of our senior members to volunteer to host dinners in their city. And we looked after hiring the caterer and making sure people could sign up for the events. Our partners leaned in to sponsor those events, but ultimately the management of that event goes to the host, the dinner host. We're still ironing out some kinks on like how we really empower people to have a C100 membership experience without a staff member present to enforce norms, best practices, welcome people, facilitate intros, right? All those things are actually a skill set that my team has that most people don't just grow up knowing how to host a great dinner event. Like, it's just not, it's a skill set. So we're still working on some of those like one sheets and training programs and that kind of thing to allow people the opportunity to do that. But the ultimate goal is that if you want to, if you're a member and you want to host a member event, you can kind of apply to that, to do that. You can apply for funding to do that. And that we manage all the back end. That means we manage the database, the marketing, the actual product that you use to sign up for the event, et cetera, so that we've got the data, but our members are self-organized. That's happening right now. We think it's really important, actually.
Oh, that's wonderful. And it's mutually beneficial as well, right? So the person who's actually hosting it, he gets to network, he gets to like do something that he enjoys doing. And you're kind of like getting an event or a community program almost for free.
Yeah, it's not free, that's for sure. But it's not. We don't have to scale staff to the same degree. So we're still actually funding the event, and it does take a lot of staff time. It takes staff time to manage the marketing around an event, right? To manage the RSVP list and that kind of thing, and then to make sure that it turns into a that there is a flow from joining the event to kind of post-event feedback and conversion of if there were any guests there, asking them to join as a member, etc. So it's still facilitated in some sense, but it's not a 1-to-1 ratio of C100 staff to event. That's where you get some of what we might refer to as economies of scale. But it's not quite free.
Right. Yeah, nothing is free in life. All right, good.
No.
Yeah, so Laura, what would a good member experience mean to you for your members?
For our members, a good member experience. I think a good member experience, for one thing, is at least 3 years long. And most of our members, have been members for that long. If not, a lot of them have been involved for many years. But it would be a few years long, and the reason is that when you're building a network that is, constructed, right? It's not like all these people just knew each other before. We've built the program and the platform so that global Canadian tech leaders come to know each other so well that they know they're on each other's call list. That takes more than them just being on a list. It takes more than them having met each other once at a conference. It usually takes people getting to know each other, meeting each other a few times, right? I saw you at the last event. How's that thing you were talking about? Oh, great. Did I tell you I'm moving on from my job? Oh, I've got this thing. Yeah, I'm thinking about moving into VC, for example. Oh, let me connect you to so-and-so. Oh, he's right over there. Those are the kinds of experiences that you want people to start to have. And you cannot go to just one event and that magic happen for you. It takes investing and putting your face in front of the community several times. So to me, a great member experience has to be not necessarily long-term, not short-term, but what I call medium-term. You really want people who are able to show up. And showing up, like I said, doesn't have to be in the form of physical events. It means maybe you are super busy and you just love to be active on our Slack space and answer questions that people have about hiring or about new markets or fundraising or whatever it is. So that's the first thing. The next thing in terms of member experience, I would say someone who has a direct relationship with a member of the C100 staff member will probably do better over the long term because it helps our staff make meaningful connections. So we keep a database that has as much information as we possibly can on each member. That's supportive, but it doesn't replace the personal relationship that we as a staff team hold with our members. So as a team, we will very regularly come together saying, hey, we're looking for someone who knows a lot about, who's big in, who's an alumnus of this school, or who's big in Web3, who could talk about Web3, and of course, some of those things are visible in our database, and others would end up being, who would love this is so-and-so. Like, let's get her involved as well, and him involved, or we'll get requests. I've got 6 requests in my inbox right now of people who are saying, hey, I really want to connect with so-and-so. Could you tee up an intro? Like, here's why I want to meet with him. And so having a personal relationship with the staffer is definitely part of it. The next thing I would say is we measure engagement among our membership base. We set a goal for each C100 member. Just realizing my computer is unplugged, so I'm about to lose battery.
Sure.
1 second, I didn't realize that. We want each C100 member to engage in one or more program, event, or initiative throughout the year. So our target there is 90%. And so we will make sure that we have an event at any given time throughout the year that means everyone basically is engaged at some point throughout the year. What else on member? Oh, and then in terms of experience onboarding, as soon as someone joins, they get a welcome gift from us, like a physical gift in the mail. It's really fun and nice, and there's a note card on it that says you're part of the community. We use Swag Up, by the way, for that service, which is good, not great. It's good. I think Sendoso is probably, if you're a bigger association, you can afford to use Sendoso, which integrates with Salesforce. That's the one to use. We're not quite big enough to use that service yet, so we use Swag Up. And they all get an onboarding call, like I mentioned. They get added to Slack. They have an onboarding marketing journey, like that we send. How to connect. Here's the mission and vision, the history of the organization. All these things get dripped out to them after they join. We also have volunteers in our community we call the Welcome Crew. And there's about, I guess, 10 or 12 members whose whole job is just to welcome new people. And so they will divide up the list of new members from the last month amongst themselves. I do not manage this process. No one on our team does. We just send them the names. And the chair of the Welcome Crew literally divides up the names. I don't know how he does it, alphabetically or something, and assigns people to it. And the Welcome Crew then goes out and writes to the new members saying, hey, on behalf of the community, I'm welcoming you. And they offer to do a virtual coffee if they want it. It's no requirement to do so. It's just to make people feel great when they join. And then, of course, there's always something coming up at C100, as there is probably in most of your associations. We've just held our annual summit, and so that's like, really good time to join before that, because then people get to come to that. But from now, I mean, we still have a calendar that goes all year, and so there's always something coming up, and we hope new members take great advantage of that.
Right. So you mentioned that you experiment a lot and you actually have a lot of like test products out there from time to time. How would you define the success of individual events or products?
I don't understand the question. How do I define?
Yeah. So like which ones you would consider have flopped and which one actually worked?
Right. Okay. How do I summarize across all the things we've done? Our we have the two most important KPIs or key performance indicators that we track, which are, by the way, separate from our big mission. But how do we know, like in the short term, if we're accomplishing our mission? We look at growth and engagement. And so growth, of course, that's like how many members are joining surrounding a certain event or certain initiative that we have running. Are members joining in our markets of interest? Like, we have 4, strategic markets that we're focused on right now. Like we'll use growth as an indicator of like, is the product interesting to people, right? And interesting to our target audience. The second thing on engagement is like, it comes down to really easy things to track, like attendance. Like our summit, for example, I mean, we wondered but we sold out our hotel block in like 4 weeks. So it was definitely, that was like, okay, people want to do this. We're going to do this again and again and again. There was a year where that wasn't true. The first year I ran the summit back in 2017, we were kind of new at attracting this audience, the growth leaders. C100 had previously been known mostly for like early stage founder programs. And so it was a little bit tougher to get that first moving. And now it's not at all. We realized we probably are over the hump of us figuring out that this is definitely an event that people want to come to. So attendance, same thing with virtual events, by the way. Virtual events, like the events that were really focused on problems that founders were having, were very, very popular. Events that were kind of less focused on problems and more on, big themes and, macroeconomic stuff was a little less popular. That's because I think you can imagine, like, there's that expression, like, make painkillers, not vitamins. Because, if you're selling vitamins, you're like lucky if you get those people who actually take them every day. But if you are selling painkillers, you know that when someone's in pain, they're going to take it. So we had definitely some of that. Now that doesn't mean that we only host stuff around problems. You just can tell what works and what doesn't. Lastly, I would say, I think like one of the biggest flop products that we've had, or programs that we've had, basically people just dwindled off. Like they signed up for it thinking they were signing up for one thing, and it just ended up not being what they intended, and people stopped showing up and basically fell apart. So And yeah, we're not afraid of that. Like, we're not afraid to experiment with that stuff at all. So we intentionally hold those test products back from sponsorships, for example, just because we want to make sure that they're right before you've got people like spending serious dollars on them.
Right. You mentioned that you use a lot of online products to engage your community and then like do the day-to-day operations of the association. How do you decide like which platforms are like good for the members at a given point in time?
Okay. It starts from knowing what problem you're trying to solve.
For the members?
And then finding the right solution for that problem.
Okay.
For us too, right? For us too. So I think I should say we use a lot of digital platforms for us too, because we're a small business at the end of the day. And if you're not leveraging like small business SaaS products, like you're doing too much work that you could be paying $6 a month for. So let me just start from internally. We use a product called Fellow. It's actually an Ottawa-based. Actually, the founder introduced us.
Yeah, we're friends.
Here's he's one of our fellows from 2019, I think. He's a 2019 fellow at C100, and his product is also called Fellow, and it's awesome. We use it for every single meeting we use internally. It's how we use it's how we do our weekly Monday and Friday stand-up calls to make sure we've accomplished everything we need to and that we're prioritizing right for the week. We use it for our one-on-ones as a team. We really use it for everything. I use it with my board. So we use Fellow. It's like definitely one of our back-end really like keys to success. Of course, we use Slack as a team. We plug into Slack as often as we can, whether that's Zoom or Loom. We have an internal employee wiki through Notion. We also have just created an external wiki for our members. It's used password protected just for members, but we use Notion for that, and that's got our directory on it. We are in the process of setting up a integration, basically a Zapier connection between Salesforce and Airtable, which is where our directory is. So it's like Salesforce to Airtable to Notion. So Notion is where the users visit, but it's an Airtable directory, and that actually isn't yet plugged into our Salesforce database, but it's about to be. And so we use a lot of that stuff. So we always prefer off the shelf first. Definitely preference for super flexible SMB SaaS tools that are no code or low code. And actually, I'm going to tell you too, we use a form product called Form Assembly, which is really painful to learn and use. But once you learn it, it's so much more sophisticated than like Form Titan or Form Hero or Google Forms, because it integrates in a two-way integration between our database and our form. So it can either push data in or take data out of Salesforce and pre-surface it. You can totally white label it to any branding or anything you want, as long as you've got basic HTML. And it also integrates with Stripe, which is our
payment.
The payment platform that we use. Yeah, and so Form Assembly is actually a big. It's a big part of our lives. That's C100. We use Form Assembly for everything. When people are updating their address so we can send them a gift. When people are signing up for an event, really, there's always like a Form Assembly, and it just reads people's email and attaches it to their contact record in our database. That's a huge thing. I can't say enough. Like, too many associations are not using an integrated software stack. And there's a lot out there you could spend millions of dollars on, by the way, to like buy something big and off the shelf. For us, Salesforce plus Form Assembly plus Zapier, and like it actually does integrate and works great, and it's a lot more affordable. It's either that or you're paying someone a full salary to just do data entry the whole time, and that is a waste of money. So we really like to use tech tools for sure. And then Slack, our members use Slack.
So I guess your members will come.
Our market, I should use Campaign Monitor, by the way, for our marketing, which also Campaign Monitor, we don't like it that much, but it's integrated with Salesforce. And so for that reason, we like it a lot. Wish it was more flexible from a design standpoint, but it works well for us because we can just like really easily click and add people to a distro, or to get a list of, to be added to an event list, for example. So that's on the marketing end. And then, of course, we use Canva to do design. We sometimes hire designers, which in the cases where it really matters to have a professional. And then other than that, we just use Canva. So.
Nice. So which of those platforms do your members use to connect online? Slack, one for sure. Yeah.
Slack and our wiki. Yeah, and our wiki, which is Notion. So Slack and Notion. We have had we used to run a Facebook group. Now here's a problem. Here's a problem that every association manager here has had before, is you have a member or a series of members who say, we should really have a Facebook group. Could you make a Facebook group for us? And then you go and make a Facebook group. You might get a few people use the Facebook group. You may even get a lot of people use the Facebook group, but the person who suggested it to you never uses the Facebook group. So this happens to me all the time. People say, you know what would be really great is you've set up this kind of a program. I would love to sign up for that kind of thing. And then that person actually never does. So we need to be very careful to listen for actual user behaviors and not what people just say they want. Same thing in feedback from surveys, right? Is people will make suggestions on what you should do differently. And then if you put too much weight into that one suggestion, you realize like Lisa Cashmore saying, hey, Lisa, I know Lisa, they all want something different. Slack, text, Facebook groups, LinkedIn groups, they all totally want something different. What's the right one to use? The one your members end up using. So we have been pitched and sold, of course. We have RFP'd a bunch of, websites and platforms where members can go on and chat with each other. And part of me, like with the audience that we serve, when you look at just how people connect with one another in your field, whatever that is, for us it's technology, but for, if you're running a nursing association, maybe it's WhatsApp, right? Or maybe it's none of those things. Maybe it's just like an email listserv. Like, I don't know. Whatever people actually use to connect with each other, that's the one you use. And so we have really wound down our support on Facebook. It's just not something that we found a lot of activity on. And we have focused all of our energy into Slack. And there's some adoption challenges with, I'll say, like older generations. And so we've tried to really help them adopt it. And it's not always with older generations, but there is like a bit of a generational divide with Slack. Anyway, there is, at least I've observed that. But it is by far and away our highest engagement platform, and our engagement continues to grow on Slack. And so that's where we're invested. We use Twitter a lot too, but that's more public. And so that's not something our members use to engage privately with one another or in the kind of cone of the member experience. And so, I think it starts from identifying like what is actually the problem you're trying to solve. Don't just do it because one person tells you to. This advice actually came to me from a really great product thinker who I was saying, we need a platform where people can talk to one another. They can like ask questions and give feedback and showcase what they're working on, and you can tag them in different ways. And so we actually did like 2 hackathon events where we had a bunch of developers and people in Silicon Valley who just wanted to volunteer, like come together and identify product features and everything. And we're like, great. And then we went and RFP'd a bunch of platforms, and we got, $10,000 for this or $50,000 for that or whatever. There's lots of things off the shelf for these exact purposes. But the product leader we spoke to was like, do I really need one more login just to be a member at the C100? I'm on Slack all day. Why don't you just have a Slack group? And then whatever people actually engage with on Slack, then maybe you learn what they need longer term. Do they even want a job? Like a lot of people are asking us for a job board. Oh, we should really have a job board at C100. Okay, well, if we have a job, and then we start looking at job boards and we start asking questions about how much people actually get engagement out of them, how much people actually successfully hire out of a job board, And we were actually pretty disappointed with the results. We were like, well, I mean, maybe there's some people out there who find job boards to be incredibly lucrative. Like you just get tons of applicants who are high quality applicants from the job board. I haven't seen it. So if someone else figures that out, great. But we looked at a job board. We actually looked at acquiring like a whole job board, platform. And when you started to ask the founders and CEOs of those companies and hiring managers, they were like not aware that their job board actually led them to good candidates. And they said things totally different than job board. They said, actually, I just need talent. Please, I need warm referrals. And so we now have a private talent search channel within our Slack channel. We do a ton of intros from it. We share resumes, resumes primarily. Some people will share jobs that are open. I don't know how much traction they get for that, but those things ended up being a lot better. And we could have gone and spent all this money building a job board. And we didn't, because we thought, let's just like see what people actually like and how they use it. So I think there's a whole lot of like somebody on your board or your boss or whatever will say, we need a Facebook group, or they'll say, we need a job board, or they'll say, we need a platform where people can chat, be in chat groups. And I just think you need to actually figure out how people are leveraging each other through free platforms first, and then think, wow, people love this job board thing we have running in Slack. Maybe we do need to invest $10,000 into a job board. But until I think the base case is proven, it's like a whole lot of people building software and expensive solutions for problems that may not actually be that important to your member base.
Exactly. So I guess look at the problem first, and then create small experiments to find out like what is working for you, and then expand based on that. Don't just like go out and then like acquire a huge product only to end up not using it.
Yep. Or even if, exactly.
Right.
That's exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Or to find out that
there you go. Yeah. So Laura, we're running out of time, so we're going to like go to some audience questions at this point. The first question is from Holly Bena. Holly is asking, how can I take action on some of these ideas if I am not in a leadership role in the association?
You are in a leadership role in the association. I would say you first need to stop thinking like that, because everyone's got a job to do and your boss definitely expects you to be a leader in it. So that's the first way I'd answer that question. I don't say that facetiously. I'm just saying you've been given a metric to hit. If you haven't, then you need to like talk about that with your manager, saying, what's my goal here? Is it engagement? Is it growth? Is it number of participants in a certain program? Is it satisfaction scores and the net promoter score, whatever that is? And then this is actually how product managers are given a job to do, right? In a tech company, is that they're given like a metric, and how they work with their product to make sure that that metric gets achieved is kind of up to them. It's a sandbox that they can play in. And so I would say all I'm really talking about is about listening to your users. And not in the way that you like, that's just, oh, someone have this idea, I should really do this thing. It's like actually watching what they engage with, right? And positioning it. And so I think that actually is what your manager's hoping you to be doing. None of the decisions that, for example, the Airtable member directory, that didn't come from me. That came from one of our team members who was like, I think this is exactly what people are asking for, because everyone wants to know who else is a member, where they're located, how they identify, who are the other founders in the network, or who are the other VCs in the network. And so he just went and built it. And it was a big success. This is V1, and our members are definitely engaging in it. So I think you don't have to be in the leadership role. But if you are a leader on the line, you do need to empower this kind of independent thinking. And you need to help your team prioritize. So we have a lot of members, and you all will too, who will suggest things that may even be like non-strategic or even self-serving on the part of the member. And you definitely need to help your teammates say no or redirect attention to other programs that are more of a strategic priority. But you as an employee, if you're not thinking about how to best serve your members and don't have the tools in place to actually, or at least the leeway to go do that, Like you go out and
Right. I'll just like add to that for Holly. Holly, if you're not in a leadership role where you can actually invite 20 members to an onboarding journey, there's nothing stopping you from talking to one member and giving them a wonderful onboarding journey, and then like telling your boss how wonderful that went, right? And right after that, if it goes well, then I'm pretty sure your leadership team will be all on board with this. So start small and then grow from there.
I would actually say, just on that onboarding journey too, it took us a few times to get that right. And the mindset that we adopted was like, if we screw this up, then we've affected only that cohort, right? Only those members. So we'll do it better next time. And each month we actually do get a little bit better. And I think about the first member onboarding we hosted and I'm like, oh, but it's way better today than it was. And we get a chance every month to get it better. So, yeah, just...
So next question is from Yasmin Khan. Yasmin is asking, what are some business models that startups use that we can use to actually scale our business development?
Business models that startups use? Business models. Okay. I'm not sure I totally understand the question, but in terms of business models,
I think she's more asking about what ideas or models startups use to kind of like scale business development.
Oh, I see.
Sure.
I see.
Sure.
Okay. Can we move? I'll think about that one. Maybe can we move on to the next question?
Absolutely. So next question is from Bill Alder. Bill is asking, what would you recommend in terms of an engagement with your members if you want to connect with them one-on-one? Is it like monthly, quarterly, semi-annual? Is there an ideal approach to it?
Oh, one-on-one. Interesting. This is going to depend hugely on the scale of your organization. So when I started in my role and we had about 100 members or so, I said to my board, I said, I don't know all these people, but if I don't know them all by next year at this time, we got a problem. You should fire me. So I made it a point, I need to have a one-on-one relationship with every single member. That's no longer true, but I want every single one of our members to have a relationship with someone on the team. It's probably not as possible for me too with all several hundred of our members, but and so I think that really depends on your stage of growth. At some point you need to delegate that. And that might be to staff members, but it also could be to appointees. We are rolling out kind of a new role that we're having some of our community leaders play who are members. We're calling captains, like a city captain or an event captain. We have like steercos in various markets that are made up of like a few members there. We have a board member that's kind of in charge of each new market launch. And so we've outsourced some of that. All your members should have a one-on-one relationship with at least one of those people. And so how you build that org chart from you as the CEO to the people responsible for memberships to the people then who are appointed by you, who might be other volunteers or board members, I think everyone should have a one-on-one relationship. One of the things that's built into our community is that you have to be nominated to be a C100 member by an existing member, or they have to sponsor an application that you have submitted. And so there's always at least, like, everyone knows someone. That's intentional on our part. That's not true for most associations. You can just join. Ours has a little bit more built-in friction for that. But yeah, that's an interesting question. I think you need to think about how many one-to-one relationships are possible and valuable for you. And also, like, not all members are equal. That's just true. Like, if you think about, you've got some members that are absolutely community activators that are magnetic, that are a draw for other members. Those are people that you probably do want to have a one-to-one relationship with. For someone who's relatively like less engaged or less likely to, you may not need to have a one-on-one relationship. If your members, for example, are tiered with how much they might donate to your nonprofit or something like that. Again, like, or if you go to the opera and you notice, like, on the back of the program, there's that section that says, like, the people who are, like, you know, just donors versus, like, dress circle versus platinum, super platinum, blah, 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 you know. I bet the CEO of that nonprofit knows every single one of the super premium whatever donors by name and has probably had dinner with them a couple times this year, versus like your broader base. might need to have a really one-to-one relationship with someone else on the fundraising committee. So I would just say, like, it probably depends on your scale, but that most people involved should have a relationship.
Alrighty, we are running out of time. So Laura, we're going to wrap up. What would be some key takeaways for our audience today?
Okay. My first key takeaway is really get clear on what your product actually is, not necessarily what it says on the package. Like, why are people joining? Number two, make sure you're defining the problems that you're trying to solve for your members before buying solutions for them. And number three, I would say for yourself as a person running an association, try to use the most, I guess, the best, like, off-the-shelf tools and resources to make your life easier so that you're not doing a lot of manual work. Associations really only work if they scale, right? And so you need a lot of all the stuff that's not your core competency of managing your relationship to your members. You should be finding software and stuff to do it for you.
That's wonderful, wonderful. And Laura, do you have any book recommendations for our audience?
Oh, heck yes. Thanks for asking. Okay, Culture. This is a book by Ben Horowitz. For those of you not in the tech world, Ben Horowitz is one of the two co-founders of Andreessen Horowitz, now called A16Z. It's the preeminent venture fund in Silicon Valley. This book is called What You Do Is Who You Are. It's not what it sounds like. It basically talks about what your employees, and in my case, our members, the actions that they do is the culture that you have created. And so we now, when we onboard people, we talk about our 4 core values as a community and behaviors that we want to see our members emulate, and we celebrate those behaviors. Because when people say things like, oh, that felt so C100, we want that to create images in the mind of our members and for them to, like, adopt that culture. And so I think cultural statements and behaviors that you just expect people to do and you reinforce are part of how you scale a membership experience across geographies and space and time in a way that outlasts you as the executive director. So that's one. And then the other one I recommend is called Who. This one I will say is a little bit dated with some of its references. It's by Jeff Smart and Randy Street. This is on hiring. And I think that in a membership-based association, the most important thing is having a great team that loves your members and that your members love back. And so hiring the right people is really, really important. And I know some startups for whom not following this book when they're hiring is a fireable offense. So that's not true at my team. If you don't follow this book by the book, it's not a fireable offense, but I really recommend finding some process for hiring so that it is rigorous, that you are hiring people who are bought into your values, and that you're hiring people who are going to ultimately be successful long-term employees.
That's wonderful. Laura, can you share a personal habit that has contributed the most to your success?
I never feel successful. That's probably it. Someone asked me the other day, how do you know you found product market fit? And I said, I don't think we found product market fit. So I think that's maybe part of it, is that I'm quite paranoid and iterative all the time. And so that would be probably the closest thing to my success, is that I never feel like I've been successful yet. And then I'll say one more. Actually, that's probably the biggest one, is I never feel like we've accomplished. I always feel like there's something next we should have done better. I'm always paying attention to, like, what we could have done differently.
How can people reach out to you if they have any more questions?
I would just say, link in or let's do comments on this podcast. I probably can't answer everyone's questions one-on-one, but I would be delighted to try. So let's give it a go.
Alrighty, sounds good. So, all right, Laura, thank you so much for being with us today. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Take care.
Alrighty. So that was the episode with Laura Buhler. There were so many gold nuggets in this episode. I hope you actually had your pen and paper handy and you took some notes. And it may be a bit of an information overload for a few of you. What I would say is that don't get overloaded. Find at least one idea that you can really take action on. We go to a lot of podcasts, we read books, but nothing happens until you take action. So start with something small and then build on top of it. And once again, if you want to learn more about growing your professional association, please join one of our learning events on our website at grype.ca/events. That is grype.ca/events. All right. We wish you all the best in your association journey. Bye for now.